Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here at the EurAfrican Forum of 2022, and of course, a word of thanks to Pedro Reis, the chairman of the advisory board of the Portuguese Diaspora, that has addressed to me such kind invitation. And of course, the title of this session now is the Ocean Strategic Challenge. But rather than the ocean facing a strategic challenge, we do face a dire challenge because of the ocean demise. And so I would probably change the title for the strategic role of the ocean. And maybe as an introduction, to start with something that is being said repeatedly, but probably has had less a small impact, which is that the ocean occupies the largest part of our planet, 70%, but that this percentage, in fact, does not seem to say much to many people. So let's try another image. With globalization, of course, we are getting a smaller planet. If the planet were to be a spaceship, this spaceship would carry a tank with water occupying almost 3/4 of the ship, more than 2/3 of this ship. And of course, such a tank would look like a fundamental component of a spaceship like this. That's probably where we are. And today, our mechanics of the spaceship, of course our scientists, tell us that the ship is losing power due to structural deficiencies caused by misuse of the spaceship. We are definitely not able to cool off the engines. We are losing parts of it. Even so, we fail to even know what is happening with the tank, the 2/3 of the spaceship. We know we cannot fly the spaceship without the tank. We know that we will even probably disintegrate ourselves without the tank, but we don't understand much about how the tank works because we have failed to truly invest on knowing more about the oceans. So let us look at the role of the ocean in this as a fundamental part of this spaceship and what has been our action in relation to it. Well, the ocean is the biggest life support system in the planet, much bigger than any other and much more complex than any other. The ocean is much more complex than the atmosphere. But because, as I said, we have not invested enough, for many years, even I think throughout most of the years of this 21st century, the fundamental problem, the way we perceive the fundamental problem of the ocean has been a problem of unsustainable fisheries. The problem of overfishing, the problem of illegal, unreported fishing has dominated most of the debates of the multilateral international community. And this is, of course, we can understand also by looking into our international legal instruments. We had the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that was adopted in '82, but then only came into force in '94, and we had in the '90s very important fishing agreements, which actually respond to this perception that the biggest problem of the oceans is fisheries and therefore the loss of biomass. In the last 10 years, however, and unfortunately, we have found out that this is not the only problem. The problem of the oceans is not only fisheries, it's not only biomass loss, it's not only the extinction of predators. We go on eating the tigers and the lions of the ocean in our plates at the table with our tunas and other top trophic chain animals of the ocean. But we have learned in 2004 of acidification for the first time. Acidification is that the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the ocean are changing the pH of the ocean, the chemical composition of the ocean. And well, if the ocean is fundamentally a biochemical phenomena, and if we are already changing the bio part of the ocean for many decades with overfishing, illegal fishing, with the loss of biomass, now we know that we are already as well changing the chemical part of it. So we are fundamentally, totally changing the ocean, which is this life support system of the planet. With acidification that has changing the pH of the ocean, we will lose a lot of ecosystem and a lot of habitats, a lot of species. But in 2009, we learned about something even more disturbing, which is the growth of temperature in the ocean. And unfortunately, in 2009, when it was the famous year of the failure of Copenhagen for what then became, in 2015, the Paris Agreement, we understood that the temperature of the ocean was rising mostly in tropical areas and in superficial waters. And unfortunately, since then, in the last 10 years, science has been telling us that we are raising immensely the temperature of the water in every part of the planet and at more than 1,000 meters deep. And this is troubling because these are very bad news for the ocean level rise. On top of this, of course, we had a very important moment in 2017, which was this United Nations Ocean Conference in New York at United Nations, where three very important issues came to the fore. The fact that with the second El Niño, which was between 2014 and 2016, we lost something like 25% of the coral reefs of the world. We had already started losing them with the first El Niño in '98. So mostly now, half of the corals are gone. These are extremely complex animals that have been here for much longer than our species, 400 million years. And that, although occupy less than 1% of the ocean surface, they are the source of more than 30% of the biodiversity of the ocean. Imagine losing 30% of the biodiversity of the ocean in the coming decades. But we are in the course for it. Also very important in 2017 was the realization that the ocean temperature needs to release this energy by creating more extreme weather events. And so in 2017, there was so many hurricanes in the Atlantic basin that I think all the letters of the A, B, C, D letters that we used to call the names of hurricanes were exhausted. And finally, plastic pollution became very clear at the eyes, especially, I would say, of the media, which, of course, means of the public opinion as well. And this being bad, this floating pollution, at the same time, is actually good to call the attention for the problems of the ocean and that it's not a question of fisheries only and anymore. I would say that probably the last problem of the ocean was identified by a report of the IUCN in 2019, which is the oxygenation of the ocean. We understand now that many areas of the ocean are dead. The ocean produces half the oxygen of the planet. Actually, that's where life started. It was 4 billion years ago with the unicellular blue algae that we started having oxygen produced in the planet. That's how we had then forests and plants that are also producing the oxygen we breathe. But the problem that these dead zones are increasing should also make us wonder. The conclusion of this is that this is all very worrying, but now clearly climate change impacts in the ocean is the worst of all. The question of temperature, and also the fact that this question of temperature is affecting not only the Arctic, which we knew for a long time, but that Antarctica is also melting at the extreme west and east parts. And this is something that IPCC scientists, the panel of scientists of the Convention for Climate Change, they do not know. They do not have forecasts. They are not able to predict what will be the sea level rise with Antarctica melting and with more than 2 degrees. So the challenge of Antarctica alone is a great geopolitical, fundamental challenge for the international community, for the world, and for Euro-African cooperation. There are, of course, attempts to produce protected areas in Antarctica that have been so far vetoed by a number of countries that understand that is not a priority. These are, of course, quite severe problems. And the same way we now speak about climate crisis and not climate change anymore, we should start speaking about an ocean crisis, with these consequences that we are not only losing the life support system of the planet, but we are losing the ecosystem services that are fundamental for our societies and our economies. We know that some of these ecosystem services are known, fresh water, but people do not understand that fresh water comes from the ocean. And if fresh water comes from the ocean with microplastics, the fresh water we'll drink will carry microplastics with it. And this, of course, is already happening. We also have the issue of oxygen. We tend to think that oxygen is produced only by forests, but the ocean is a very important producer of oxygen. So we need absolutely to stop the growth of dead zones in the ocean. Of course, these are ecosystem services that are difficult to price, but that are priceless for our societies and our economies. We cannot imagine any industry functioning without fresh water, or without oxygen, to say. We have, of course, also the issue of biomass that we are losing. And biomass is very interesting because it's the only ecosystem service that is part of our economy, clearly, from the ocean. It is called fishing stocks. In economic terms, we call the biomass generated by the ocean fishing stocks, and therefore they become part of our economy. But when we pay for a fish that is captured in the ocean, we don't pay for the biomass. We don't pay for the fish itself because nature is considered to be worthless. We pay for the fishing organization, the fishing work hours, the fisher working hours. We pay for the boat, we pay for the fuel, we pay for everything, but we don't pay for the fish. And this is something that fundamentally make us must think on different ways. The ocean, through these ecosystem services, truly is an asset. And as an asset, the ocean should be perceived truly as a new capital, or an old capital, the oldest capital, the natural capital. So, with considering natural capital within our economics, and we don't do it at this moment, as you know, our cost-benefit analysis for what a business is does not include the natural capital, of the cost of the natural capital or the benefit for the natural capital of the planet. And so from here we conclude that we need to protect the ocean, but maybe protect is a wrong word, is an old word, because if we protect the ocean, we look at ocean conservation as a cost, but we truly need to start looking at it as an investment, and this as a natural capital, because nature is getting sparse and reduced and fewer with the way we've been over-exploiting the natural resources of the planet. And when nature became sparse, it becomes more valuable. And in accordance with economic theories and demand and offer, nature is becoming our biggest asset. And this is why we need to see, I think, very much the ocean as a capital on a change of paradigm, like the one we are, in a way, enduring in the planet in the 21st century, from the Industrial Revolution era, in which we have still our legal and cultural and frameworks, to a new era of sustainability, of environmental sustainability, and especially of decarbonization of our economies and our societies. This is good news for the developing countries, and this is very good news for Africa as well, because Africa is very rich in natural capital, but is poor in manufactured capital, in financial, in economic, in commercial, in industrial capital. So the sooner natural capital becomes mainstream economics, and there is a lot of work being done in changing taxonomy at the European Union level for this, because the more pertinent developing countries will become in the 21st century. The conclusion, of course, is that only this way we will be able to save the ocean. We are not going to save the ocean through environmental policies or through philanthropy. or through ocean conservation, only through changing the economy, only through making sure that the ocean is part of the new green economy, and that the natural capital will become an integral part of it as well. I wanted to close with a couple of other thoughts. What have we done? Well, we've done pretty little or pretty much nothing in terms of international community decision-making on oceans, because we have managed to develop a strong climate action, and in Europe we have national climate action plans. Every European country has one. We have the Green Deal, the Ecological Pact, which is redefining the European Union within this new paradigm, with an incredible channeling of human and financial resources into these new goals. But we are very far from having ocean action. In fact, it doesn't even exist as a terminology, ocean action. If we look into the last 20 years, we know that for 20 years we've been speaking about the need to stop subsidies for harmful fisheries. But for 20 years, this did not happen. Of course, it started happening now with the last session on the 13th of June of the World Trade Organization, and we hope this work will be finished because it was a very great step. We've been trying to build up the frameworks for climate change with the Paris Agreement, but the ocean is not present in the Paris Agreement. There is one word of referring the oceans in the preamble of the Paris Agreement. Even on the Sustainable Development Goals, there is Sustainable Development Goal 14 for oceans, but this was the last goal to be adopted and approved with a lot of hesitation by the international community, by the UN membership at that time. And when we look into the investment of the Sustainable Development Goals, the ocean is, of course, the one that is less invested, that deserves less investment. So we need to change this approach to the ocean, which is an approach of procrastinating, solving the problems of the ocean, for an approach where the ocean becomes a priority for our geo-economic agenda. And I think that things are changing, fortunately. Only this year, in 2022, there were two great conferences, one just recently in Lisbon last month, the United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon, which had more than 40 heads of government and heads of state, and one organized by France in February, the One Ocean Conference, that also had a very high number of heads of state and government. This means that only this year, around 80 heads of state and government were in ocean conferences to discuss the oceans, and this is probably what is new and what is positive. I'm going to spare you with a lot of tasks that are ahead for an ocean agenda of action. Of course, the oceans have no IPCC, and scientists were fundamental to create the climate change legal frameworks. The oceans have no COPs, and so we cannot assess how the ocean is evolving year after year like we can do with the climate COPs. But we have good news as well with the plastic treaty that was decided in Nairobi last April, that is now being under negotiation by UNEA. And then, of course, we have the issues of the roadmap of 30 by 30, 30% of marine protected areas by 2030. This way creating the safes of this natural capital. But clearly, at this critical decade for the survival of the human species, that is the decade until 2030, and we know that, accordance with IPCC scientists, we are 25 months to reach the peak of greenhouse gas emissions in the planet, we truly need a new commitment for the oceans that creates for ocean action like we have climate action. So in a way, we probably need a truly Paris Agreement for the ocean that will be developed in the future with NDCs, with national determined contributions for ocean action, very much the same way the Paris Agreement has established its NDCs. Europe and Africa could have here a truly not only conservation agenda, environmental conservation, not only a way for economic and social development, but a chance to face one of the most critical geopolitical challenges of our era. Let us save the ocean, to save our spaceship, and to save us with it. Thank you very much for your attention.